Hey, everybody. So, chapter 2 in the book um, is where we really start to think about how we practice reading rhetorically when we're reading, and how that practice is really the foundation of critical thinking. And what you're going to learn is that by reading rhetorically and getting better at reading rhetorically, which means that you really understand what a text is trying to do, why it's trying to do it, how it's trying to do it, makes you a better critical thinker about what you think about things, right? And maybe what you even want to say about them. And all of that has to happen before you're ever going to be a better writer. There's one rule about being a good writer. We write well when we care about what we write about. So in this class, one of my main philosophies as a teacher is okay, um, your essay might say, find an argument in a song. I'm not going to tell you what song to write about. Part of the challenge of that is you have to find a song that's worth writing about. You know, Happy Birthday wouldn't really be a very interesting song to write about. There's no argument in Happy Birthday. Beyonce's Formation, that might be a song with an argument. Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind, for the people older than me even, has an argument. You got to find a song that's trying to say something. Public Enemy's Burn Hollywood Burn has an argument. Okay, so I don't think it does me you any good as a student if I tell you what to write about for two reasons. One of the things about critical thinking is figuring out the world around you and figuring out what you think is important and choosing that for yourself. The other thing is I might assign you something that just doesn't inspire you, right? And that's different than being unrelatable, right? Um, Sometimes things that are unrelatable can be really good for us to write about, right? Because they might make us think about all that we don't know, or all that we take for granted, or all that we wish we could change but don't know how, or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to give you loose constraints. You got to find a song with lyrics, and then you're free, right? Because I want you to find something that you care about. So it's reading the world around you critically. That develops your ability to think critically. And all of that is the dirt and the compost and the mulch that your writing grows out of like a tree. The best way to improve writing, there are two ways. One of them is to write. Write as much as you can. The other one, equally as important, is to read. And not just read like la la la, I'm reading and I have a rough idea of what I just read. You got to read rhetorically. So in this chapter, I want to call attention for this lecture, or this little mini lecture, to pages 58 through 61. Close reading. Most people read, they just sort of stick their eyes in something and they read to the end, okay? I had a student in an 1102 class once who went and got a book from the library. I'm looking for a book here that was as big as it. I don't see one. This big. This book was this thick, okay? He had a paper due in like 4 days, and it was a 4-page paper on whatever his topic was. And he had picked about an 800-page book. And I saw him in the library, and he had turned that book to page 1, and he was reading it. And I was like, student, I forget his name, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm going to read this book. That's not how this works. Okay, book is a technology, so you would maybe look at it. Look at the table of contents. What are the chapters called? Who wrote it? Right? There are things that you do sort of before, during, and after you read that are as important of a part of the reading process as the act of reading. And again, you have to be metacognitively aware that you're doing this. You have to consciously practice these different aspects of reading. So with close reading, the first thing you do is learn about the author. Why do we do that? There's a website that you can go to, and you should look it up. It's martinlutherking.org. And a quick glance of that, first of all, we've learned that .orgs are good. They're not selling anything. They're positive. But you take a quick look at that website. It looks all right. And then you start looking at it a little closer, and it starts looking a little weird. And then it seems like, yeah, they're talking about the Jews, and they're talking about rap lyrics. And if you go down to the bottom, there's a thing that says powered by Stormfront. If you click on that, it's very, very, very bottom, small print. You get to a white supremacist website. So Nazis have published, they own and are publishing MartinLutherKing.org. You got to know who your author is. The last thing you want to do is write a paper for a college class that cites MartinLutherKing.org because you are citing neo-Nazis. And that ain't cool, right? So learn about the author. As you learn about the author, jot down any impressions you may have about the author's purpose. Everybody has a bias. If you don't think you have a bias, you probably live in a room full of people with the same bias as you. So that's okay. Being alive is to have a bias, but you have to understand who has a bias and what, and so you know where they might be coming from before you read. All right, before you read anything, skim it. See how long it's going to be. See if there's headlines. Notice them. Get a general sense of what you might think is coming, so you're not totally surprised as you're rolling along. Okay. We've done two things here that we haven't even started reading yet. Okay. Maybe just read the topic sentences. A well-written article should have a thesis and topic sentences that are very clear to read. And if you just read that, you should get the gist of what's going on. That applies to your own paper as well. That's organization, and that's breaking your argument into main and subpoints in a logical way. Okay. Number 3, explore your own knowledge and beliefs on the subject. You got to get honest with how you feel. If you're hung up on certain things, you got to bring those in and say, well, I'm going to be reading something that's going to challenge my views. And you also have to say, you know what, quite honestly, I don't know a darn thing about this. And I got to go into it naively or innocently or ignorantly, okay? And then before you read, you reflect on it. So you sit there and you think, okay, there's an article in here about how mascara is made. And you're going to read it for one of the assignments. And you might think, well, I buy mascara, or I don't. My beliefs on it are, I believe that, maybe you're a person that just doesn't think that women need to wear makeup, right? Maybe you're a person that says, I want to look as good as I want to look, and I like wearing makeup. Maybe you're a person who's never thought about the subject, really, okay? But you need to reflect on it. That article is a connection between makeup and the makeup industry and animal cruelty. So what do you think about that? What are your views on animal cruelty? Do you think it's okay to subject certain animals to extreme torture in order to save humans from, illness, injury, in order to protect humans from certain, chemicals or whatnot? As you read, you annotate. This is something that has become harder and harder and harder to do as our reading has moved online. What I would like to suggest is if you can't print something out to read it, or if you can't mark up your book, I recommend marking up your book, or mark it up in pencil and then erase it when you go to return it. Have a piece of paper handy and make some notes. Write some things down. You want to write down things that seem interesting. You might want to write down words you don't understand. You might want to write down points that you disagree with. Or you might want to, one of the most important things you do is write down things that you just don't get. I don't understand what's going on here. Basically what's happening is your head is, when you annotate a text, which means when you write along with it or write on it, you join a conversation with the text. It's not just the text is like passively coming down to you. As you are reading it, you are writing back to it. That is the meaning-making process. You don't get it up here unless you are kind of fighting with it and wrestling with it and questioning it and challenging it as you are reading it. That's one of the most important things, okay? Afterwards, you can make an outline. And we think about outlines back when we were in school, Roman numeral 1, A, B, C, number, all that. Just make a list. Write down some points. Top 5 things that were important to this essay. Top 5 questions I have. Just break it down into chunks that you can remember. And sometimes you want to free write about the text. Just take 5 seconds or 5 minutes and just write roughly about, about what you thought. Free writing is a magical thing if we allow ourselves the time to do it. Often, when we free write, where we start is not where we end up. And there's really only one rule of free writing, two perhaps. There is no free writing. Oh, no, that's Fight Club. But free writing, the one rule is you don't stop. So you might start by saying, I don't know why I'm free writing. I don't even know about this article. You just write. And you give yourself a set amount of time, and you make sure you write for that amount of time. The more important rule, perhaps, is that you don't judge what you're writing. And what happens is you can kind of get into this zone. I don't know if anybody plays music or sports or does any kind of creative work, but sometimes you get into the zone. And you get warmed up to the point where you don't quite even... It's almost like a buddy of mine that was a drummer once described it as, it's like somebody just switched you on. And you're kind of going, but you don't really think you're going, and it actually feels pretty good. And in free writing, if you can get yourself to that point, you're probably saying some things. You're kind of tapping into your larger experience. You're outside of your own, critical, judgmental head. We're going to have free writing assignments before every major essay. And I'm going to make you do it, and I'm going to look at it, and you're going to get homework credit for it or not, depending on how well you do it. But I want you to try to experience that as a goal. Try to get to where you're just kind of on, and you're typing, and you're not even really, like, words are coming out before you're even sure what they are. I don't know if you've ever had that, but it's cool, and I want you to get there, okay? And then summarizing a text. The trick with summarizing a text, let's say if you're actually going to use some sort of article in a paper that you're writing, and you need to summarize part of it. The one thing you need to do is make sure that you honor the spirit of the original text. You don't have to agree with it. But if the text is really critiquing and attacking and challenging an issue, you have to honor that spirit. And the best way to do it was with verbs. Describing that text as saying, like, this person says, that's kind of neutral, right? If they're passionately attacking something, yeah, technically they're saying it, but they're really passionately attacking it. They're challenging it. They're contesting it. They're ranting about it in their full-blown rage, okay? You want to match the spirit of the original. There's an art to summary, and that's part of it. So what I want you to get out of this chapter and the reading that we do in here is to try to be more active in your reading process, to be more mindful of what is going on with you and in you when you're reading, and then ultimately that will translate to when you're writing. You need to write back to the text as you're reading it. You need to just get involved on a deeper level with there's a lot happening. Remember we talked about Kairos. When's it written? Where is it written? What's it about? Who's it being written for? Or, hey, it's my dog. Sorry, lefty. And, what audiences would react differently to this? Sometimes that's the part we don't forget, because we have this thing where we assume that the whole world sees things the way we do. That's natural. But again, one of the purposes of college is that you learn that is just not true. Doesn't mean that you have to all of a sudden believe what everybody else believes, but it does sort of mean that you have to at least accept that they have that right. And even if you don't like it, they still are saying it. There are a lot of people in the world right now saying things that disgust me. However, my disgust is not stopping that from happening, at the very least. And guess what? It ain't gonna. So, it's just sort of about joining the conversation, the intellectual conversation, in a realistic way. And I guess, like, as my grandmother would say, being a grown-up about it. Learn, and you don't just become a grown-up because time passed. You learn to be a grown-up. You practice being a grown-up. You fail being a grown-up. You get back up and try again. All that applies to writing, all that applies to school, all that applies to life, all right? So keep that in mind as you read chapter 2.